At 1:17 a.m., my phone shattered the silence with a shrill alert that would change everything. At 1:17 a.m., my phone shattered the silence with a shrill alert that would change everything. I jolted awake, fumbling to silence the piercing tone cutting through the quiet darkness of my bedroom. My eyes squinted against the blinding screen as I read the message. Emergency alert. All Ohio residents must evacuate immediately. Head east. Do not use highways. Do not return. I blinked, sure I was dreaming. But the message stayed, harsh and unrelenting. Outside, car doors slammed, engines roared to life. My neighbor's porch light flicked on. "Mom!" My daughter Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. 12 years old, always trying to act older, but right now her voice was small. "What's happening?" "I don't know, honey. Probably just a test." Even I didn't believe the words. My phone rang. It was Diane from next door. "Are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Turn on the TV." I grabbed the remote. Emma sat beside me, her shoulder against mine. A harried reporter stood on a street crowded with people loading cars, red and blue lights flashing. "We're getting confirmation this is not a drill," the reporter said. "State officials have ordered a full evacuation of Ohio, cause undisclosed. Residents must leave immediately. Head east, avoid highways." The camera cut to the governor at a podium. "Remain calm but act quickly," she said. "Pack essentials, water, food, medications, documents. The evacuation is mandatory." A reporter shouted, "What are we evacuating from?" The governor hesitated. "We're working with federal authorities to contain the situation. That's all I can say at this time." I muted the TV and called my mum. No answer. My brother in Cincinnati. Nothing. "Get dressed," I told Emma. "Pack a bag. Just what you need." "But school?" "No school today?" I grabbed clothes without seeing them. My phone buzzed. Texts from friends and co-workers. No one knew anything. I shoved clothes, toiletries, Emma's medication, my laptop, chargers, passports into a duffel. My hands shook as I filled water bottles. Outside, headlights cut through the pre-dawn. People gathered in driveways, calling loved ones. Engines idled. "Mum, I can't reach Dad." Emma clutched her phone. He was 3 hours away in Columbus. "He's probably driving already. Reception's bad." She nodded, but I saw the fear in her eyes. On TV, a traffic chopper showed jammed highways, a river of brake lights barely crawling. "Don't use highways," I reminded myself, grabbing emergency cash from behind a family photo. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Terry, my co-worker with county connections. "This is bad. Don't wait. Well, what's happening?" I texted back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, something escaped from Blackwood Research Center. "Military's involved. Get out now. Blackwood, the fenced-off facility deep in the western forest, 30 miles from town." Officially environmental research, but everyone whispered about it. Strange noises, military trucks at odd hours. I called Terry. No connection. The network was buckling. "Ready?" I asked Emma. She stood by the door, backpack on, rabbit under her arm. She nodded, looking so small. We loaded the car as the sky remained black. Houses lit up, neighbors emerging. Mrs. Kaplan from across the street waved frantically. "Do you know what's going on?" I shook my head. "We're heading out. Need a ride?" "My son's coming." She clutched a suitcase. "Where are you going?" "East. My cousin's in Pittsburgh." I nodded. East. Away from Blackwood, away from whatever was coming. Emma nodded and glanced anxiously at the dark western horizon, where Blackwood sat hidden behind the trees. As we pulled out of the driveway, she looked back at our house. "We'll come back, right?" she asked. The alert had said not to return. "Of course," I lied. The local roads were already thick with cars. I took back streets, cutting through neighborhoods I barely recognized. My GPS kept rerouting as streets jammed. Emma fiddled with the radio, skipping through stations. Most played regular music, interrupted by dry, repeated evacuation orders. One station had switched to full emergency broadcasting. "Remain calm and proceed in an orderly fashion. Do not return to your homes until authorities give the all clear." Then a new voice crackled through. This is Captain Marcus Walsh of the Ohio National Guard. We are establishing checkpoints on all eastern routes out of the state. Please have identification ready. I repeat, this is not a drill. Emma's voice was small. Mum, I'm scared. It's going to be okay, I told her. Another lie. We hit traffic on Maple Street, coming to a dead stop. Up ahead, police redirected cars at an intersection. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Stay away from the woods. It hunts by sound. A cold shiver ran through me. I showed Emma the screen. Did you get one too? She shook her head, eyes wide. I texted back. Who is this? What's happening? No reply. The radio hissed with static. Then a frantic voice broke through. This is Dr. Alan Mercer from Blackwood Research Center. If anyone can hear this, please relay to authorities. Subject Delta 7 has breached containment. I repeat, Delta 7 is loose. This is not. The transmission cut out. Emma and I stared at the radio. What's Delta 7? She asked. I don't know. The traffic crept forward. We reached the intersection where a police officer waved us down a side street. I rolled down my window. Officer, what's going on? What escaped from Blackwood? His face was tight, his eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Ma'am, keep moving. Head east. Stay on the evacuation routes. But what are we running from? He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Just keep your windows up and stay quiet. As we drove away, I glanced in the mirror. The officer was speaking urgently into his radio, staring toward the dark, looming forest, with a look I'd never seen on another human face. We turned onto Forest Lane, a narrow road leading toward the eastern roads. Strangely, it was empty. Emma pointed ahead. Look! A house stood with its front door wide open. A suitcase lay spilled across the steps, clothes scattered like someone dropped it mid-run. Further down, an abandoned car sat sideways in the street, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. I slowed, scanning the silent yards and windows. Not a single person in sight. Don't stop, Emma whispered. I pressed the gas, swerving around the empty car. The rising sun should have been brightening the sky, but heavy clouds hung low, turning the world a dim, colourless grey. My phone rang, jolting us both. My brother. Jack, where are you? I answered. His voice came through, broken and filled with static. Tried to leave. Roads blocked. Military everywhere. Jack, you're cutting out. What's happening in Cincinnati? Saw it. Helicopter footage, not human. Like a wolf, but standing like a man. My stomach turned to ice. What did you say? Oh, they're calling it a dog. The call cut off. Emma stared at me. A dog, man, like a werewolf. That's not real, I said automatically. But my thoughts betrayed me. Old stories of campers vanishing in the western forest, hunters finding clawed tracks, the howls people claimed to hear on full moon nights that no one could explain. We reached the end of Forest Lane, where a military checkpoint had been set up. Soldiers checked IDs, waving cars through one by one. A long line of vehicles snaked ahead of us. I noticed a cluster of soldiers huddled around a radio. Their faces were grim. One of them looked up at the sky and pointed. I followed his gaze. A news helicopter hovered above the forest to the west, likely filming the evacuation. The line of cars inched forward, 3 vehicles from the checkpoint, and a commotion broke out among the soldiers. They raised binoculars, staring at the helicopter. Then from the soldier's radio, a panicked voice. Something's on the skid. It climbed. How did it climb this high? Oh, God, it's breaking the glass. The transmission cut off, replaced by a deep, rumbling growl. A sound that seemed to vibrate through the air, through the metal of the car, through my chest. I'd never heard anything like it, and I never wanted to again. Emma's hand gripped mine tight, and ahead of us the soldiers raised their weapons, aiming toward the sky. The air itself seemed to tense as everyone at the checkpoint turned to watch in horror. The helicopter above tilted sharply to one side, then began to spin. it vanished behind the tree line, and seconds later a plume of dark smoke rose into the grey morning sky. The soldiers exploded into action, shouts, radios crackling, weapons raised. One sprinted down the line of cars, slapping hoods as he passed. "Go! All vehicles, move now! No checks! Drive!" When he reached us, he leaned into my window, his face drawn tight, sweat streaking his temple. "Drive east. Don't stop for anything and stay quiet." His gaze locked with mine. "It hunts by sound." I didn't wait for more. I slammed the car into gear and shot through the checkpoint. In my rear view, soldiers mounted vehicles heading west toward the rising smoke. "Mum," Emma whispered. What did he mean? It hunts by sound? I gripped the wheel harder, my knuckles white. "I don't know, honey." She hesitated. "Do you think it's really a dog man, like those stories?" I almost denied it. But what was the point now? Maybe, or maybe not. Those were just stories, until now. We drove in silence, the road eerily empty. Most evacuees must have taken other routes. My phone buzzed with another emergency alert. Remain in vehicles. Maintain radio silence. Avoid unnecessary noise. Continue east. I showed the screen to Emma and pressed a finger to my lips. She nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit tight against her chest. The road carried us into a stretch of dense forest, the trees arching overhead in a tangled canopy, dimming the pale daylight. Every instinct screamed at me to speed up, but I kept the car steady, afraid of making too much noise. A mile in, we came upon an abandoned car. Its front end was crumpled against a tree, doors hanging open. No driver, no blood, just empty. Just beyond it, something dark lay sprawled across the road. As we crept closer, I realized it was clothing, torn, scattered, as if someone had been stripped right there in the road. I eased the car around it. "Mom," Emma whispered sharply, pointing toward the trees. A figure stood just beyond the tree line, still, silent. At first I thought it was a man, but it was too tall, too lean, with limbs that seemed just slightly too long. Its head was wrong, elongated, with pointed ears rising from the top. Even in the dim light, I saw the dark fur covering its body. I pressed the gas gently, careful not to make any sudden movements. The thing faced away from us, motionless. Either it hadn't noticed us or it didn't care. As we inched past, Emma clutched my arm. "Look," she mouthed, pointing near the figure's feet. A cell phone lay there in the dirt, screen still glowing. An emergency alert flashed on it. The figure's head twitched. Slowly, painfully slow it began to turn. Every instinct screamed at me to floor it. Instead, I kept our crawl, breath tight in my throat. Emma squeezed her rabbit so hard her knuckles were white. The thing turned just enough for me to catch a glimpse of its profile. A long snout, sharp ears, eyes like pits of ink. Not human, not animal, something between. Then, mercifully, the figure faded into the trees behind us. I exhaled, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. "That was it, wasn't it?" Emma whispered, voice barely audible. "The dogman from Blackwood?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The forest began to thin. Open farmland appeared ahead, a stretch of safety just within reach. And then my phone rang. The shrill sound shattered the fragile silence we'd been keeping. I fumbled to grab it, to kill the noise, but it was too late. From the woods behind us came a sound, a howl. It started low, almost a growl, then rose and rose until it hit a pitch so sharp it made my teeth ache. It wasn't like any wolf or dog I'd ever heard. There was something human in it. Something wrong. "Go, Mum, go!" Emma screamed. I floored the gas, tires kicking up gravel as we shot down the road, the howl chasing after us. The car shot forward, tires screaming against the pavement. In the rearview mirror, I caught a flicker of movement. Something massive and dark burst from the tree line onto the road behind us. It ran on all fours, impossibly fast, devouring the distance between us in seconds. Then it rose. It stood on two legs, still moving with unnatural speed. "Don't look back," I told Emma, my voice shaking as I gripped the wheel tighter. I pushed the car harder than I'd ever driven before, the engine straining as we burst out of the forest and onto open road. Farmland stretched on either side, and to the east, a faint line of pink marked the coming sunrise. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. The road behind us was empty. "I think we lost it," I said, easing off the gas, my heart still hammering in my chest. Emma turned in her seat, scanning the road behind us. "I don't see anything." My phone buzzed in my lap. Another emergency alert. Multiple breaches reported at Blackwood facilities. All residents proceed to designated safe zones. Further instructions to follow. I read it aloud. Multiple breaches. Emma's face went pale. How many were there at Blackwood? The question lingered between us like a storm cloud as we sped east, leaving Ohio in our wake. But even as the state line drew closer, a gnawing dread clung to me. What happened at Blackwood wasn't going to stay in Ohio. It was only the beginning. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A man's voice came through, breathless and urgent. "This is Dr. James Warren from Blackwood. Are you out of the state yet?" "Almost," I said. "We're approaching the border now." "Listen to me carefully," he said. "The one you saw, it's not the worst that escaped. Delta 7 was just the first. You need to—" A wet, guttural growl cut through the line. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was that awful sound. Then the doctor's voice returned, now a ragged whisper. "It's here. Remember, they hunt by sound, they can climb anything, and they learn fast. God help us all." The line went dead. We crossed the Ohio-Pennsylvania border just as the sun broke fully over the horizon, long beams of gold slicing across the farmland. Military vehicles lined the road, soldiers methodically checking IDs and directing traffic. Unlike the chaos back at the last checkpoint, this one was organized, efficient, serious. A female soldier approached our car, clipboard and scanner in hand. "IDs, please." I fumbled for our licenses, my hands still trembling as I passed them through the window. "Where are you coming from?" she asked, scanning the cards. "Millfield," I answered quietly. "About 30 miles from Blackwood Research Center." At the mention of Blackwood, her eyes snapped up to mine, her expression unreadable, but her grip tightening on the tablet she carried. "Did you see anything?" Emma and I exchanged a glance. "Yes," I said softly. "In the forest. It looked like a dogman." "A dogman?" Emma echoed. The soldier's face remained professionally composed, but I noticed the muscle in her jaw tighten. "Wait here," she instructed, walking briskly to a nearby tent where several people in military uniforms and dark suits clustered around laptops and radios. "Are we in trouble?" Emma asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit closer. "No, honey, they're just being careful." A moment later, the soldier returned, accompanied by an older man in a sharp, dark suit. Silver hair, neatly trimmed, impeccable appearance, despite the chaos. He stopped beside our car and glanced at the tablet in the soldier's hands. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice smooth, controlled. "I'm Agent Paul Harlow. I'd like to ask you a few questions about what you saw." "How do you know my name?" I asked warily. He gestured to my license the soldier still held. "From this? May we speak privately?" I looked at Emma. She held her rabbit so tight her knuckles were white. "Whatever you need to ask, you can say it in front of my daughter. She saw it too." Harlow hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Can you describe exactly what you encountered?" I recounted everything to Agent Harlow. The figure we'd seen in the forest, its warped, unnatural proportions, the way it moved, the sickening howl that chased us through the trees. Emma spoke up, adding details I hadn't noticed in the panic. "Its eyes glowed," she whispered. "And its hands, they weren't paws, they looked like claws." Harlow scribbled notes on a small notepad, his face unreadable. "And you received a call from someone claiming to be Dr. James Warren?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Just before we reached the border." "Did he mention anything specific about the breach? Any other subjects that may have escaped?" I hesitated, glancing at Emma before speaking. He said Delta 7 wasn't the worst one. He was trying to tell me something else, but the call cut out. At that, Harlow's expression darkened. I see. He turned to the soldier. Process them through to Zone 3. Priority clearance. The soldier nodded, handing our IDs back. Follow the blue signs to Evacuation Zone 3, she instructed. You'll be registered there and assigned temporary housing. How long will we have to stay? I asked. Harlow's gaze met mine. That's undetermined at present, but you should be prepared for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I said, my voice tight. I need to get my daughter somewhere safe, away from all of this. His tone softened slightly. Mrs. Carter, Zone 3 is the safest place you can be right now. He leaned in, voice dropping low. What escaped from Blackwood isn't confined to Ohio anymore. We've had sightings in western Pennsylvania already. My stomach turned. How is that possible? We just left Ohio and the military has the border secured. These creatures are fast, Mrs. Carter, and as you've seen, they're smart. He pulled a small card from his pocket and handed it to me, a QR code printed on one side. If you remember anything else, or if Dr. Warren contacts you again, scan this immediately. It'll connect you directly to our response team. I took the card, noticing deep, fresh scratches across his knuckles. One more thing, Harlow added as we prepared to leave. What you've seen and heard is now classified under national security. You'll be asked to sign non-disclosure agreements at Zone 3. I stared at him. You expect people to stay quiet about that? About monsters chasing them through the woods? Harlow's face didn't flinch. We're controlling the narrative, Mrs. Carter. Cooperation is mandatory. I wanted to argue, but there was no point. Not here. Not now. As we pulled away from the checkpoint, Emma leaned against the window, watching the rows of soldiers, weapons raised, all facing west toward Ohio. Mom, why would they even have dogmen at a research center? I shook my head. I don't know, baby. Do you think they made them, like in a lab or something? The thought sent a cold wave through me. All those old horror movies and sci-fi thrillers where human arrogance led to catastrophe. I hope not. The blue evacuation signs led us through quiet Pennsylvania towns where locals gathered on sidewalks, staring at the steady stream of Ohio license plates with wide-eyed confusion and growing dread. National Guard troops had set up water stations along the roadside, handing out bottled water and quick, wary glances as we passed. With reception finally improving, my phone began buzzing again. Messages from family and friends, most of them evacuated, a few still trapped in traffic, others begging for news. No one knew what was really happening. And even if they asked, how could I explain it? Some horrors didn't fit in words. And I had the sinking feeling the worst was still ahead. Everyone in the center had a story. Abandoned vehicles on back roads, strange shapes moving in the tree line, military aircraft flying low enough to rattle windows. But no one had seen what Emma and I had. Zone 3 turned out to be a massive convention center in Pittsburgh, hastily converted into an evacuation hub. The parking lot was nearly packed when we arrived, and a line of weary, anxious people stretched from the entrance. Stay close, I told Emma, taking her hand as we joined the queue. Inside, the convention center had been divided into sections using temporary walls and partitions. Volunteers and emergency workers moved people along, directing them by county of origin. Medical stations lined one wall, and a towering board near the entrance listed the names of missing persons in stark black marker. A harried woman in a FEMA vest checked us in, barely looking up as she handed over a pair of laminated cards, CSD 127 and D128, Section D. She slid a package toward me. Toiletries, thin blankets, a flashlight, and 2 single-use water bottles. Cafeterias serving every 4 hours, showers at East Wing, check the bulletin for updates. Briefings are at 10 and 1800. She was already calling the next family before I could thank her. Section D was a cavernous exhibition hall, packed wall to wall with thin cots labeled with numbers. Families had tried to carve out what privacy they could, draping sheets and blankets over string or chairs. The air hummed with constant low conversation, crying children, and the sharp crackle of the PA system announcing updates. We found our assigned cots wedged between a young couple with a crying infant and an elderly man staring at the ceiling like he wasn't really seeing it. "This is where we're staying?" Emma asked, eyeing the thin mattress. "Just temporarily," I promised, though Harlow's 2 weeks hung heavy in my thoughts. We unpacked what little we had, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. I checked my phone, dozens of missed calls and messages, battery at 12%. "I need to find a charging station," I said. Emma pointed across the hall where a huddle of people clustered around a few power strips. "Over there." "You want to come?" She shook her head, glancing uneasily at the unfamiliar faces around us. "I'm too tired." "Okay, I won't be long." I kissed her forehead and crossed to the charging station. While my phone charged, I scrolled through messages. Nothing from Jack since our broken call. Mom had made it to an evacuation center in West Virginia. A string of friends checking in, asking if we were safe. Then one message from an unknown number made my blood run cold. "Warren, if you made it out, be careful what you say. They're listening. They learn language. Meet me at the south entrance. 2 p.m. Need to warn people." I checked the time, 1:47 p.m. I looked back toward our cot. Emma had fallen asleep, clutching her rabbit tight. The elderly man beside her nodded at me, wordlessly promising to keep watch. Leaving my phone at 23%, I pocketed it and made my way to the south entrance. A crowd had gathered, watching as more evacuees arrived in overstuffed cars and military trucks. I scanned the faces, searching for anyone who might be Dr. Warren. A tap on my shoulder made me jump. A man in his 60s stood beside me. His grey hair was wild, glasses crooked on his face. His clothes were rumpled and smeared with mud, or blood. His eyes were sharp, darting around like a hunted animal. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice low but familiar. It was him, the voice from the phone. "James Warren, thank you for coming." "How do you know my name?" I asked warily. "You answered your husband's phone earlier. I traced the GPS. Ex-husband," I corrected automatically. "It doesn't matter now?" His gaze flicked anxiously over the crowd. "Is there somewhere quieter we can talk?" I hesitated, instincts screaming at me to be cautious. "What is this about? What do you mean they learn language?" "Please," he said, his voice urgent. "You have no idea what's happening, what's coming. We can't stay out here." I glanced back through the crowd toward Emma. The man at the cot still sat watchful. Emma was still sleeping. "All right," I said. "But make it quick. This man was a stranger, potentially dangerous. Whatever you need to say it here." Warren exhaled, glancing around. "Fair enough, but keep your voice down." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "What I'm about to tell you will sound insane, but after what you saw in that forest, I'm hoping you'll believe me." I gave a tight nod. Blackwood wasn't just a research facility. It was a containment site. He watched my face for a reaction, then continued. "For the past 16 years, we've been capturing, studying, and holding cryptids. Creatures most people dismiss as myths." "Cryptids? You mean like Bigfoot?" "Some like that. But our primary focus was more aggressive entities." "The dogmen?" I murmured. Warren nodded grimly. "Officially classified as canned bipedal entities, CBS, Delta 7 was our oldest specimen, captured in the Allegheny National Forest in 2009. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. How many were there? 17 different subspecies, different capabilities. His gaze darkened. They all escaped during the breach. I felt a chill despite the press of bodies around us. What caused the breach? Warren's hand trembled as he adjusted his glasses. That's the part no one wants to admit. We caused it. We? The research team. We were experimenting with neural interfaces, trying to communicate with them, learn their language. He gave a bitter laugh. Turned out they already understood us better than we thought. A memory hit me. That figure in the woods, how deliberately it moved, how it had turned to watch us, not like an animal, but something calculating. Delta 7 was watching, learning. It studied our security, our routines. It planned this escape. If they're that smart, I asked, voice tight, why haven't there been more sightings before now? Because they don't want to be seen. They're territorial, elusive. But now, his voice trailed off. Now what? He met my gaze, and for the first time I saw real terror there. Now they've developed a taste for revenge, and they've had years of observation to learn about us, our weapons, our weaknesses. This isn't a public safety crisis, Mrs. Carter. This is the start of something much worse. My throat tightened. Even if everything you're saying is true, the military... We've already lost 3 containment teams, he cut in. These things are bullet-resistant. Their hides denser than Kevlar. They can outrun vehicles, and the worst part? He leaned closer. They communicate. Infrasound signals, below human hearing. They're coordinating. A surge of dread ran through me. A commotion near the entrance drew both our attention. Several men in dark suits pushing through the crowd, scanning faces. I spotted Agent Harlow among them. Warren stiffened. They're looking for me. Wait, why are you telling me this? What am I supposed to do with it? Because they're lying to everyone, saying it's one creature, saying it's under control. He pressed something into my hand, a small USB drive. Everything's on here, research files, containment footage, autopsy reports. People have a right to know what they're up against. I can't... Just keep it safe. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. He began backing away, then hesitated. One more thing. They hate water, can't swim. If you're cornered, find a river, a lake, anything deep. Before I could say another word, he vanished into the crowd. Seconds later, Harlow and his men swept past, still searching. I slipped the USB into my pocket and made my way back toward our cots. Emma was still asleep, clutching her rabbit. The elderly man beside her gave me a knowing look. You met the Blackwood man, he said, not a question. I hesitated, then nodded. I worked maintenance there for 30 years, his voice a dry rasp. Never allowed in the lower levels, but I heard things, saw things, when they thought no one was watching. What kind of things? He looked away. Tests, on the subjects, and the screams. He shivered. Didn't sound animal, not entirely. A cold dread crept up my spine. Did you know about Delta 7? Only by reputation, the smart one, always watching. He leaned in, his eyes grave. They underestimated it. That was their mistake. Before I could ask more, the PA crackled overhead. Attention all evacuees. A mandatory briefing will begin in 15 minutes in the main hall. Attendance is required. Around us, people began standing, gathering their things, ushering children along. I glanced once more at the USB in my pocket and knew things were about to get worse. I gently shook Emma awake. What's happening? She murmured, groggy. Just a meeting. Come on. The main hall was enormous, a massive convention space hastily transformed into an assembly area. Thousands of evacuees were being herded inside by FEMA workers and soldiers. A stage stood at one end, floodlights already trained on a podium. Cameras were being set up. This wasn't just a briefing, it was going to be broadcast. The elderly man from our section appeared at my side. Name's Frank, he offered quietly. Lisa, I replied, motioning to Emma. And this is Emma. Frank gave Emma a kind nod, then leaned in. Whatever they say up there, it won't be the whole truth. Remember that. The lights dimmed. A hush swept through the crowd as a tall woman in a military uniform approached the podium. She radiated command presence, sharp eyes, hair pulled tight, ribbons and insignia glinting in the harsh light. Good afternoon, she began. I'm General Rebecca Hayes, commanding officer of the Joint Task Force responding to the Blackwood incident. A collective stillness settled over the crowd. "I know you have questions, and I'm here to provide answers." She gestured to a screen behind her, where a map appeared. Ohio, a red zone pulsing in the dense western forests. At approximately 0200 hours this morning, a containment breach occurred at the Blackwood Research Facility. The screen flickered to show grainy aerial shots of a compound surrounded by thick trees, then footage of broken fences, twisted gates, debris-strewn corridors. The facility housed several research subjects, including a large canid predator designated Delta 7. This animal, along with several others, escaped containment and posed an immediate threat to nearby communities. Murmurs rippled through the hall. I spotted Agent Harlow among a cluster of plainclothes men near the stage, their gazes sweeping the room, watching reactions. "I want to be absolutely clear," Hayes continued, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "The situation is being contained. Our forces have successfully eliminated 3 of the escaped subjects, including Delta 7A. Collective gasp swept the room, followed by hesitant applause. People clung to that promise of safety like a lifeline. I turned to Frank. He barely shook his head. "She's lying," he whispered. Hayes raised a hand for quiet. "As a precaution, the evacuation order will remain in effect for the next 72 hours while thorough sweeps continue. We expect to begin returning residents home in stages, starting with areas farthest from the containment zone." More applause, faces around me lighting with cautious relief. Then her tone shifted. Sterner, colder. "I also want to address the rumors circulating about the nature of these animals. The subjects from Blackwood were experimental hybrids, developed for military applications, enhanced wolves. They are not, as some have claimed, mythological creatures or dogmen." Emma clutched my hand. "But we saw it," she whispered. "They're just saying that so people don't panic," I murmured, though my words tasted like ash. "Due to the classified nature of this research," Hayes pressed on, "all evacuees will be required to sign non-disclosure agreements prior to returning home. This is a matter of national security." Frank snorted softly beside me. National embarrassment, more like. The rest of the briefing blurred past, details about evacuation centers, compensation packages, projected return dates. But all I felt was the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. As the assembly broke up and people began filing toward the exits, a commotion flared by a side door. Soldiers moved in, surrounding a disheveled man, shouting over them. "It's Dr. Warren," Frank said, squinting toward the scuffle. "Fool doesn't know when to quit." Warren's voice cut through the noise. "They're lying to you. Delta 7 isn't dead. None of them are. They've evolved beyond." 2 soldiers grabbed his arms. Another clamped a hand over his mouth. They dragged him through the doors and out of sight. "Poor bastard," Frank muttered. "Been trying to blow the whistle for years." On our way back to the section, overhead, TVs blared looping coverage of the briefing. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, "Blackwood incident contained. Evacuees to return home within 72 hours." Frank shook his head. "They're rushing this," he muttered. "Far too soon." I glanced at him. "You really think they're lying about killing the creatures?" His gaze hardened. "I know they are. Conventional weapons don't work on those things. Back in 2009, when they first caught Delta 7, it took an experimental sonic cannon to bring it down. Nothing else touched it. Then how do we fight them?" "Million-dollar question, isn't it?" Frank sighed. "Warren might have known, if they haven't silenced him for good." I felt the USB in my pocket, cold and impossibly heavy. "I met with him before the briefing," I admitted softly. "He gave me something. Data. Research files on the creatures." Frank's eyes widened. "Be careful with that, Lisa. People have disappeared for less." We reached our section. Emma flopped onto her cot, phone in hand, battery clinging to life as she texted friends from other centers. "Any word from your brother?" Frank asked. I shook my head. "Nothing since this morning. Last thing he sent was a message about spotting one of the things on helicopter footage. Said Cincinnati's a mess, roads blocked, military checkpoints everywhere. Frank's expression darkened. My daughter's a nurse at University Hospital there. Says they've had dozens of patients coming in, deep lacerations, missing limbs, all attacked by what witnesses described as huge wolves walking on two legs. A chill ran through me. They've reached the cities already. Faster than anyone thought. And smarter, Frank murmured, casting a wary glance around. The hospital's under military lockdown now, they're keeping it quiet. But it's spreading. The walls of the evacuation center felt suddenly too thin, too fragile, and I had a sinking feeling the worst was still coming. A new alert flashed across my phone screen. Emergency update, quarantine now in effect. No one in or out. Cellular networks in evacuation zones will be temporarily disabled. Standard service to resume within 12 hours. Before I could show Frank, every phone around us went dead at once. The sudden silence in the hall was shattered by a wave of confused voices. People stared at their screens, tapping buttons, frowning. "It's starting," Frank muttered beside me. "What is?" I asked. He leaned in, his voice low. "Information control. They don't want people talking. Don't want anyone sharing what they've seen." His eyes flicked toward the USB drive in my pocket. "We need to see what's on that drive. Now." "How? Our phones are dead." Frank rubbed his chin, thinking fast. "The media center, 3rd floor. They've got computers set up for evacuees to message family. Hardline connections. They might still work if it's just the cell networks they've cut." I hesitated, glancing at Emma. She was curled up on her cot again, phone abandoned, eyes closed. "I can't leave her." A soft voice spoke up nearby. It was the young mother from the neighboring cot, her child playing quietly beside her. "I'll stay with her," she offered with a tentative smile. "I couldn't help overhearing. If what you're saying is true, people deserve to know." I studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you. I won't be long." Frank and I slipped into the flow of evacuees, careful to avoid the growing number of soldiers patrolling the corridors. The loss of phone service had left a visible tension in the air. People gathered in small, tight clusters, whispering rumors. The media center was on the 3rd floor, a windowless room lined with aging desktop computers. To my surprise, it was still open. Only a handful of people sat at the terminals. Half of the monitors were dark. "Ethernet," Frank explained quietly. "Not affected by the cell blackout." We found a computer in a corner, half hidden by a partition. I slid into the seat and inserted the USB drive, my hands unsteady. "Keep watch," I told Frank. He posted himself by the door, scanning for anyone approaching. The drive loaded. Dozens of files appeared, research papers, video clips, internal memos, security logs. One caught my eye. CBE_overview.mp4. I double-clicked it. The video opened with Dr. Warren seated at a desk, his face drawn and weary. He stared directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began, "the worst has happened. The CBEs have breached containment, and the government is moving to cover up the true nature of the threat. This briefing contains everything we know, compiled in secret over 16 years of research." The video cut to security footage of a containment cell. Inside was the creature we'd seen in the forest, towering, wolf-like, upright on two legs, pacing its enclosure. On-screen measurements labeled it Subject Delta 7. The creature's full height brushed 9 feet. Warren's voice narrated over the footage. "Subject Delta 7, captured in 2009, the oldest and most intelligent of our specimens. Note the opposable thumbs, the elongated limbs, the skull structure. It allows for advanced cognitive function." The scene shifted. The creature was manipulating objects in its cell, stacking blocks by size and color, turning a simple latch mechanism, even drawing crude shapes on the floor with a piece of chalk. "At first, we believed these were animals with severe genetic mutations," Warren continued. "We were wrong. Brain scans revealed neural complexity approaching human levels. The footage cut to a series of MRI images highlighting areas of dense neural activity in the creature's brain. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just a monster. It was something worse. Something sentient. I glanced over my shoulder at Frank. "It's all here," I whispered. He gave a grim nod. "Then we need to get that drive somewhere safe, before they find us." And somewhere deep down, I knew time was running out. The video resumed, the screen filling with footage of microscopic structures and neural imaging. Their brains show enhanced regions for sensory processing, spatial awareness, and higher cognitive function, Warren's voice narrated. These aren't just animals, they represent a parallel evolutionary path, one that developed intelligence without ever relinquishing its predatory nature. The image shifted to a sterile lab where figures in hazmat suits dissected a creature, a smaller, younger version of Delta 7. CBE physiology is remarkable. Their muscle density is 3 times that of a human's. Their hide can withstand small-caliber rounds. Their senses surpass the capabilities of our best detection equipment. And perhaps most concerning, they heal at a rate we still don't fully comprehend. Time-lapse footage showed a gaping wound on a creature's flank, slowly knitting itself closed in a matter of hours. But it was the next revelation that made my skin crawl. Their most dangerous adaptation, Warren continued, is their ability to learn and to communicate. The screen cut to a security feed. Multiple creatures, housed in separate cells, suddenly turned their heads in unison towards some unseen signal. A moment later, they began pacing in synchronized patterns, their movements eerie in their precision. They communicate using infrasound, the frequencies below the range of human hearing that can travel for miles through solid rock and steel. We believe they operate as a networked intelligence. What one learns, all learn. What one sees, all see. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. If that thing in the forest had seen us, the others already knew. Now for the most disturbing discovery. Warren's voice dropped lower, one the government has buried for decades. The video displayed strands of DNA, side-by-side comparisons, and notations I couldn't decipher. But the implications were clear. Certain markers in CBE genetics show undeniable signs of artificial manipulation, sequences too precise, too advanced to have occurred naturally. We traced them back to human genetic engineering technology from the late 1970s. Frank sucked in a sharp breath beside me. The program was called Project Cerberus, a classified operation to create enhanced battlefield assets capable of autonomous operation in hostile territories. Officially terminated in 1982 after several test subjects escaped from a facility in northern Michigan, or so the records claim. Warren reappeared on screen, looking older now, his face lined with exhaustion. Blackwood wasn't built to protect the public. It was built to house the descendants of those original escapees, not to contain them, but to study them, to learn from what the original project called an uncontrollable success, and possibly to continue the work. The video cut to grainy footage of a younger Warren standing in a conference room, gesturing angrily at a group of stern-faced military officers. "When I uncovered this," his voiceover said, "I tried to go public. They removed me from my post, placed me under surveillance. That was 6 years ago. I've been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for a breach I knew was inevitable." The final segment showed Warren staring directly into the camera, his expression grim. "If containment has failed, then humanity faces an existential threat. These are intelligent predators, specifically designed to hunt humans. They learn, they adapt. They coordinate over vast distances, and worst of all, they have every reason to hate us." He leaned closer to the lens. "They cannot be contained again. They cannot be negotiated with. And based on everything we know, they cannot be exterminated using conventional means. Our only chance is to understand them better than they understand us." Coordinates appeared on the screen. if you're watching this, find me. I have a plan, but I can't do it alone." The video ended. I sat back in the chair, the hum of the computer loud in my ears. Frank's face had gone pale. "They made them," he whispered. "All this time I thought they were studying some freak accident of nature." "We have to tell people," I said, reaching for the mouse to copy the files. A hand clamped down on my wrist. I turned, and there was Agent Harlow, flanked by 2 armed men. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Mrs. Carter." His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Frank started to rise, but one of the soldiers pressed a firm hand to his shoulder, forcing him back down. "How much did you see?" Harlow asked me. I met his gaze, my pulse hammering in my throat. "Everything. You created them, and now you're lying about containing them." Harlow sighed, almost like a weary teacher dealing with a stubborn student. "It's more complicated than that," he said quietly. "Yes, Project Cerberus was a mistake. But the CBEs aren't what they were anymore. They've evolved far beyond what we designed. The original specimens," Harlow went on, his voice low and almost reverent, "are a legitimate scientific marvel, the first non-human species on Earth to develop intelligence on par with ours." "They're killing people," I hissed, "an unfortunate situation we're working to contain." Harlow nodded toward one of his men, who silently removed the USB drive from the computer and slipped it into his pocket. "Mass panic won't save anyone," Harlow added. "That's why we need people like you to cooperate." "By lying to them?" My voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. "Telling them it's safe to go home when it's not?" Harlow leaned in, his face inches from mine, his words cold and measured. "Let me be clear, Mrs. Carter. You have a daughter downstairs, a little girl who'd very much like to have her mother, to sleep in her own bed again, to forget about monsters in the woods. That can happen, one of 2 ways. With your cooperation, or without it." The threat hung between us, heavy and unmistakable. "What do you want?" I asked at last. "Your silence." He straightened, smoothing his tie. "Sign the non-disclosure agreement, return home when we say, and forget what you've seen." "And if I don't?" Harlow smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "There are other facilities, Mrs. Carter, places not so different from Blackwood where certain phenomena are studied. People can spend years there without anyone on the outside knowing where they are." Frank stirred beside me, his voice sharp. "You can't silence everyone. People saw those things. They'll talk. Individual accounts can be dismissed as hysteria, confusion, trauma." Harlow gave a small shrug. "Mass witnesses can be managed with the right narrative, and frankly, most people would rather believe in experimental wolves than accept that dogmen are real. Fear is easy to shape when people are desperate for normalcy." I hated how much sense that made. Even I would have laughed off such a thing a day ago. "What about Warren?" I asked. "We saw you drag him out during the briefing." "Doctor Warren," Harlow said, checking his watch, "is receiving the psychiatric attention he so obviously needs." He gestured to his men. "Take them back to their section. The NDAs go out in the morning. I suggest you both sign if you want to be in the first group cleared to leave." As we were led out, I caught a final glimpse of the screen. Warren's coordinates still flickering at the bottom. I locked them into memory. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I couldn't forget. Back in the shelter, Emma was awake and chatting with the young mother who'd watched over her. She beamed when she saw me. "Mom, Kelly says we're going home soon. Is that true?" I forced a smile. "That's what they're saying, sweetheart." Frank was steered back to his cot by one of Harlow's men, who gave him a long, warning look before walking off. Night fell, and the great hall dimmed to a soft, uneasy glow. Emma drifted to sleep, exhausted from the day. I lay awake in the dark, the weight of everything I'd learned twisting in my chest. Genetic experiments, government lies, intelligent predators, and a conspiracy that stretched back decades. I wasn't supposed to be part of this, yet here I was. Around midnight, Frank shuffled over and sat quietly on the edge of my cot. "Can't sleep either?" he whispered. I shook my head. He sighed. "I'm not signing their paper." His voice was soft but firm. "Some things matter more than safety." "What about your family?" I asked. He gave a sad smile. "Wife passed a long time ago. Kids are grown, living overseas now. Not much they can threaten me with." I hesitated, glancing over at Emma's sleeping form. "I have her to think about." "I know," Frank said. "And I don't blame you for wanting to protect her." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. "I memorized those coordinates from Warren's video," he said. "It's a location about 40 miles from here, deep in the Allegheny Mountains. Looks like an old military site, probably a bunker. From what I can tell, that's where he's gone." "What are you saying?" I asked. Frank gave me a grim, determined look. "I'm saying I'm going after him." "If his plan has any merit," Frank murmured, tearing a page from his notebook and pressing it into my hand. The coordinates were scrawled across it in shaky pen. "If you change your mind, that's where I'll be." "You're leaving now?" I asked, glancing around the dimly lit hall. "How'll you even get there?" He gave a weary smile. "I've still got my truck, and nobody's paying much attention to an old man like me. Think about it. Those things are getting closer every hour. The government can't stop them. Maybe Warren can." He gave my hand a quick squeeze and shuffled back to his cot, gathering a few belongings into a worn canvas bag. I lay back on the thin cot, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing. What was the right choice? Sign their papers, take Emma home, and pray the authorities could contain this? Or risk everything to chase a desperate man into the mountains? The answer came at 2:37 a.m. Emergency lights flared to life, casting the massive hall in pulsing red. The PA crackled overhead. "Attention! Security breach in Sectors 1 and 2. All personnel implement lockdown protocol. Evacuees remain in designated areas." Around us, people jerked awake, startled cries filling the air. Emma clung to my arm. "Mum, what's happening?" Before I could answer, the double doors at the end of the hall burst open. Soldiers stormed in, weapons raised, barking orders. "Away from the windows! Move to the center of the room! Now!" Panic spread like wildfire. Cots overturned. People screamed. Amid the chaos, I spotted Frank by the emergency exit, waving urgently. "Emma, grab your backpack, now!" "Are we leaving?" "Yes, stay right behind me." We pushed through the stampede of evacuees. Somewhere behind us, glass shattered, followed by a shriek that cut through the din like a razor. Frank held the door open just enough for us to slip through. "They're here," he whispered. "In the building." "The dogmen?" Emma breathed. Frank nodded, his face grim. "Time to go." We hurried down a narrow stairwell, the sounds of chaos growing fainter but no less terrifying. At the basement level, Frank led us through a dim service corridor to a loading dock where several vehicles sat abandoned under flickering lights. Among them was Frank's battered old pickup. "Get in," he ordered, yanking open the door. We piled onto the bench seat, Emma sandwiched between us. Frank started the engine, killing the headlights, and rolled toward the perimeter fence. "Won't they stop us?" I asked, scanning for guards. "They've got bigger problems right now." I followed his gaze toward the main building, where alarms wailed and emergency vehicles screamed into the lot. The checkpoint ahead was chaos, soldiers shouting, vehicles racing in every direction. We slipped past unnoticed. Once we hit the main road, Frank switched on the headlights and floored the gas, the old truck groaning as it surged forward. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, clutching my hand. I squeezed her fingers, the slip of paper with Warren's coordinates still clutched in my other fist. "To find someone who might know how to stop this." As we left Pittsburgh behind, the night stretched out ahead of us, thick with fog and dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just an isolated disaster. This was the beginning of something much bigger, something ancient that had been caged and forgotten until now. I thought about that emergency alert from yesterday morning. Do not return. Maybe it hadn't just meant our homes. Maybe it meant our old world, our old beliefs. Because once you know the truth, once you've seen what's out there, how do you ever go back? The monsters in the woods were real. Worse, we'd made them. And now they were coming, not just for revenge, but to reclaim a world that had once been theirs. The first hint of dawn painted the horizon in pale grey. Emma had fallen asleep against my shoulder, but I stayed wide awake, watching the tree line blur past, listening for distant howls threading through the dark. Whatever plan Warren had better be good, because if it wasn't, none of us would live to see another dawn.